the Kura-Araxes culture, language, and DNA. But before we get too deep into the video, first I want to tell you guys about my social media platforms. So I have a Clubhouse account and we can actually talk to one another on it. I also host Clubhouse rooms every now and then where I might talk about history and genetics of the Middle East and Africa. I have a Twitter page, a Facebook account, and a Facebook page, as well as a Instagram, all titled The Hebrew of Israel. And what I typically do on these platforms is post upcoming videos as well as slides for my presentations. And so just be on the lookout for all of that on my social media platforms. And if you want to support me financially for the channel, you can look at my Patreon as well as my PayPal and my GoFundMe. And with all of that out of the way, let's begin with the video. I mentioned the Kura-Araxes culture many times in the past. Now we're going to do a deep dive into the Kura-Araxes culture. So questions. 1. Where was the Kura-Araxes culture located? 2. What was the genetic makeup of the people of the Kura-Araxes culture? And 3. What language did people speak in the Kura-Araxes culture? The Kura-Araxes culture, or the early Trans-Caucasian culture, was a civilization that existed from about 4000 BC until about 2000 BC, which has traditionally been regarded as the date of its end. In some locations, it may have disappeared as early as 2600 or 2700 BC. The earliest evidence for this culture is found on the Ararat Plain. It spread northward in Caucasus by 3000 BC, and the geographical range is the South Caucasus, Armenian highlands, and the North Caucasus, period, Bronze Age, and again just circa 3400 BCE to circa 2000 BCE. Altogether, the early Trans-Caucasian culture enveloped a vast area, approximately 1,000 kilometers by 5,000 kilometers, and mostly encompassed on modern-day territories the South Caucasus, except western Georgia, northwestern Iran, and northeastern Caucasus, eastern Turkey, and as far as Syria. The name of the culture is derived from the Kura and Araxes river valleys. It gave rise to the later Khirbet-Kerak wire culture found in Syria and Canaan after the fall of the Akkadian Empire. Rather quickly, elements of Kura-Araxes culture started to proceed westward to the Erzurum Plain, southwest of Sicily, and to the southeast into the area of Lake Van, and below the Urmia Basin in Iran, such as the Godbin Tobit. Finally, it proceeded into the present-day Syria, Aqua Valley, and as far as Palestine. Its territory corresponds to large parts of modern Armenia, Azerbaijan, Chechnya, Dagestan, Georgia, Ingeshnia, North Osetia, and parts of Iran and Turkey. At Sos Hoyok in Erzurum province, Turkey, early forms of Kura-Araxes pottery were found in association with local ceramics as early as 3500 through 3300 BC, during the early Bronze Age, and 3000 through 2200 BC. This settlement was part of the Kura-Araxes phenomenon. At Sarlatete, Turkey, around 3000 BC, there was widespread burning and destruction, after which Kura-Araxes pottery appeared in the area. According to Godfrey Summers, the movement of Kura-Araxes peoples into Iran and the Van region, which he interprets as quite sudden, started shortly before 3000 BC and may have been prompted by the late Uruk collapse, end of the Uruk period, taking place at the end of Uruk IV phase circa 3100 BC. At some point, the culture's settlements and burial grounds expanded out of lowland river valleys and into highland areas, although some scholars have suggested that this expansion demonstrates a switch from agriculture to pastoralism, and that it serves as possible proof of a large-scale arrival of Indo-Europeans. Facts such as that settlement in the lowlands remained more or less continuous suggest merely that the people of this culture were diversifying their economy to encompass crop and livestock agriculture. Shangrit settlement is a prominent Kara-Araxes site in present-day Yerevan area in Armenia. It was inhabited from approximately 3200 BC to 2500 BC. Later on in the Middle Bronze Age, it was used irregularly until 2200 BC. The town occupied an area of 6 hectares, which is large for Kora-Araxes sites. The economy was based on farming and livestock raising, especially of cattle and sheep. They grew grain and orchard crops, and are known to have used implements to make flour. They raised cattle, sheep, goats, dogs, and in later phases horses. Before the Kora-Araxes period, horse bones were not found in Transcaucasia. Later, beginning about 3300 BCE, they became widespread, with signs of domestication. There is evidence of trade with Mesopotamia as well as Asia Minor. It is, however, considered above all to be indigenous to the Caucasus, and its major variants characterized, according to Caucasus historian Amjad Jonica, later major cultures in the region. The Kora-Araxes culture would later display a precocious metallurgical development which strongly influenced surrounding regions. They worked copper, arsenic, silver, gold, tin, and bronze. Their metal goods were widely distributed from the Volga, Nimdipper, and Domnitz River system in the north to Assyria and Palestine in the south, and Anatolia in the west. Their pottery was distinctive. The spread of their pottery along trade routes into surrounding cultures was much more impressive than any of their achievements domestically. It was painted black and red using geometric designs. Examples have been found as far south as Syria and Israel, and as far north as Dagestan and Chechnya. The spread of this pottery, along with archaeological evidence of invasions, suggests that the Kora-Araxes people may have spread outward from their original homes and most certainly had extensive trade contacts. Genomica believes that its southern expanse is attributed mainly to Mitanni and the Hurrians. Kora-Araxes culture is closely linked to the approximately contemporaneous Maya-Cope culture of the North Caucasus. The two cultures seem to have influenced one another. Their practice of storing relatively great wealth in burial kurgans was probably a cultural influence from the more ancient civilizations of the Fertile Crescent to the south. According to Gilep Leo Palid Bui in 2008, the typical red-black wire of Kura-Araxes culture originated in eastern Anatolia and then moved on to the Caucasus area. But then these cultural influences came back to Anatolia, mixed in with other cultural elements from the Caucasus. While it's unknown what the cultures and languages were present in Kura-Araxes culture, the two most widespread theories suggest a connection with Hurru-Uratrian and/or Anatolian languages. In the Armenian hypothesis of Indo-European origins, this culture, and perhaps that of the Maya culture, is identified with the speakers of the Anatolian languages. So here's a map displaying the Kura-Araxes culture, where you see with this dot is the modern cities, but what you need to pay attention is these blocks because these are archaeological sites, and this line right here is basically the original homeland of the Kura-Araxes culture. And here is the Kura River, and here's the Araxes River, in which the culture gets its name from. And what you see in the gray is the area of the Kura-Araxes culture. And so as you can see, it's all over the South Caucasus. It's in Anatolia, it's in Iran, and other parts of the Middle East. So here is nine points when it comes to explaining the Kura-Araxes culture. And basically it says, the Kura-Araxes exists from roughly 3,500 to 2,500 BC. As such, it is part of a millennium recognized as one of the most dynamic in humankind's long story of development and change. It was during this time in Mesopotamia that polities at the level of complexity of states, urban systems, economic and political centralization, mass production for exchange over vast areas, the Uruk expansion, and the formulation of religion into temple systems evolved. Not just trade goods, but populations were on the move throughout this time, and connections existed from the Near East to the Eurasian steppe and the South and to South Asia. In the mountains and hills neighboring Mesopotamia to the north, Tartarus and Caucasus, east Zagros, and west the southern Levantine hills along the Great Rift Valley, societies came into existence, developed, and disappeared into a time Smith describes as mobile and militaristic. Scholars to date have envisioned a Kura-Araxes with a homeland in the modern South Caucasus countries of Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and northeastern Turkey. Groups from the homeland then migrated into a huge diaspora extending across the Tartarus mountain front and southwest into the southern Levant, southeast into the Zagros Mountains area, Lake Umra, and to Kangurva Valley, across the lateral to the south of the Caspian Sea, as well as north into Dagestan and the North Caucasus. Because of this widespread dispersal, it is referred to by many names: Kura-Araxes, early Transcaucasian, or as names of early type sites, such as Shan Greventin, Pulver, Koraz, Kibrit Karak, and etc. And so here's a map, again, just showing you another map of the Kura-Araxes culture, and here you can probably see a little better the two rivers from which the culture gets its name, the Kura and the Araxes. And they would have first started off here and then spread out around 3,500 BCE. And as you can see, when it goes further out the dates get a bit closer, from 3500 BC all the way to 3000 to 2000, and so on and so forth. And obviously, as you can see in yellow is the territory. And this book also deals with the Kura-Araxes culture, and we're just going to read the abstract, but the book is called Prehistory and Proto-History of Ancient Civilizations. And it says, the Kura-Araxes, a cultural tradition of the late 4th and 3rd millennium BC, has recently become a focus of international archaeological research. It was first discovered in the mountains of the Tartarus and the South Caucasus. From near the beginning of the tradition, evidence suggests that populations bearing some of its hallmarks, black burnished handmade pottery, and a ritual of the hearth, spread out over a wide range of the Tartarus, Zagros, and Caucasus Mountains, and as far south as the area of the Sea of Galilee in the southern Levant. And again, just showing you right here in gray is the Kura-Araxes homeland. See, and then you see the line dealing with the Kura-Araxes culture, and then the dotted line is actually the Uruk civilization as well. That was in Mesopotamia. So I just want to get this visualization in your mind of where the Kura-Araxes is, where its homeland was, and then where it spread out to. Just really get that in mind, the territory, and even the type of pottery, which we'll get into a bit later. But this is another good book. It's called Ancient Turkey, dealing with the Kura-Araxes culture. That's the section we're going to specifically read. And it says, instead, the greater part of the population still lived in villages with a rural lifestyle that involved tilling the ground and raising stock. Around 3500 BC or slightly earlier, the character of the eastern Anatolian highlands began to change, reflected primarily by the appearance of visually striking pottery fired to a red and black color spectrum. Handmade, well burnished, and often decorated with sacraments, form one of the most distinctive archaeological horizons of the ancient Near East, referred to in literature as Kura-Araxes, early Transcaucasian. The suit of material culture stretched across a remarkable wide area encompassing eastern Anatolia and the Turkish Upper Euphrates, southern Caucasus, except the westernmost part of Georgia, the northwestern Iran. It has also been found in considerable quantity in early Bronze Age context in the Aqua, where Robert and Linda Braidwood designated it red-black burnished wire, a term that emphasizes the distinctive color spectrum. Further south still, a related artifact assemblage occurs in the Levant, where its conspicuous presence comes in a derivative form named after the site of Kirbet Kerak in northern Israel. And so here again, it's just showing the Kura-Araxes culture, but here it is in red, just more visualization, and it's expanding, going all throughout the Middle East. And so this is a paper dealing with the Kura-Araxes culture as well. It's from the Journal of Archaeological Science, and it says, during the period from about 3500 to 2000 BC, the ancient Near Eastern world was divided into a number of culture provinces, each distinguished by a series of distinct attributes, including settlement patterns, artifactual assemblages, and socio-economic practices. North of Mesopotamia, in the rugged mountains of eastern Anatolia and the southern Caucasus, was the homeland of a markedly different culture province, known variously and confusingly as Kura-Araxes. a designation referring to the drainage basin of the Kura and Araxes rivers in Transcaucasia, early Transcaucasian, stretching from the shores of the Caspian Sea to the banks of the Turkish Upper Euphrates River and from the Caucasus Mountains, down either side of the arc of the Fertile Crescent to, to western Iran and northern Israel, where it is known as Kerebet Kerak. Its geographical distribution alone has demanded attention. No less intriguing is the longevity of the Kura-Araxes culture complex, spanning at least a millennium and a half, 3600/3500 through 2000 BC in certain regions. So again, just showing you another map of the Kura-Araxes culture, that this is the general typical area of, of, of the culture. And of course, all the dots you see are sites. So here is the black, red, burnished wire that they were referring to. I just want you to visualize this culture for it to come to life. So this is what they were talking about whenever you hear Kura-Araxes culture and artifacts dealing with it. Specifically, it's very distinguished pottery. So early Transcaucasian cultures and their neighbors. ETC, or early Transcaucasian cultures, were first identified on the basis of their pottery in the Transcaucasus area between the Kura and Araxes rivers and between the Caspian and Black Sea. Their very distinctive pottery is handmade and predominantly black on the outside and red or black on the inside. So again, here's more of the pottery just for you to see. And here is a timeline detailing the Kura-Araxes culture. And as you can see, 3500 through 3000 BC, going all the way down to the 2000 BC, and basically beginning in the late Chalcolithic or the late Copper Age to the Middle Bronze Age. And again, it depends on locations as well. So here is the Kura-Araxes horizon, and this is just detailing the very beginnings of its homeland, of its origin, before it spreads out. So the Kura-Araxes culture was roughly from 3500 BC through 2000 BC. Geographically, it was situated between the Black and Caspian Sea, south of the Caucasus, between the Kura and the Araxes rivers. And they had a particular type of pottery. It was a black-red pottery. So we have a general basic understanding of the Kura-Araxes culture. But with that being said, what is their genetic makeup? So this is a good paper dealing with that very question. It's called Ancient Human Genome-Wide Data from a 3,000-year-old interval in the Caucasus corresponds with ecogeographic regions. So it reads, in the 4th millennium BCE, the archaeological record attests to the presence of the Myocope and Kura-Araxes, two major cultural complexes of the Bronze Age in the region. The Myocope culture is well known for its large and rich burial mounds, especially at the eponymous Myocope site, which reflects the rise of a new system of social organization, while the Kura-Araxes is found on both flanks of the Caucasus mountain range, demonstrating a connection between north and south. Contact between the Near East, the Caucasus, and steppe, the Central Europe is documented both archaeologically and genetically as early as the 5th millennium BC. This increased in the 4th millennium BCE along with the developments of new technologies such as the wheel and wagon, coppery alloys, new weaponry, and new breeds of domestic sheep, which such contact was critical in the cultural and genetic formation of the Yamnaya complex on the Eurasian steppe, with about half of Bronze Age steep ancestry thought to derive from the Caucasus, which we talked about in the past. Half of the Yamnaya people are Caucasian, Caucasus hunter-gatherer DNA. Anyways, in the 3rd millennium BC, increased mobility associated with wheeled transport and the intensification of pastoralist practices led to dramatic expansions of populations closely related to the Yamnaya, accompanied by the domestication of horses, allowing more efficient keeping of larger herds, with expansions ultimately contributed a substantial fraction of the ancestry of present-day Europe and South Asia. Thus, the Caucasus region played a critical role in the prehistory and formation of Eurasian genetic diversity. While autosomal and mitochondrial DNA data appear relatively homogeneous across the entire Caucasus, the Y chromosome diversity reveals a deeper genetic structure attesting to several male founder effects, with striking correspondence to geography, ethnic and linguistic groups, and historical events. The stark distinction seen in our temporal transect is also visible in the Y chromosome haplogroup distribution, with R1/R1b1 and Q1A2 types in the steppe, which is dealing with the Yamnaya, and L, J, and G2 types in the Caucasus cluster. So we're going to deal with the characterizing the Caucasus ancestry profile. These individuals closely resemble the preceding Neolithic Caucasus individuals and present a continuation of the local genetic profile. This ancestry persists in the following centuries, at least until 3100 YBP, as revealed by individuals from Kura-Araxes from both the North Caucasus and the South Caucasus, as well as Middle Bronze Age/Late Bronze Age individuals from the north. Overall, here's the key part to keep in mind, which is in yellow. Overall, this Caucasus ancestry profile falls among the Armenian and Iranian Chalcolithic individuals and is indistinguishable from other Kura-Araxes individuals, Armenian Early Bronze Age, on the PCA plot, suggesting a dual origin involving Anatolian/Levantine and Iranian Neolithic/Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry, with only minimum hunter-gatherer, Eastern hunter-gatherer/Western hunter-gatherer contribution possibly as part of the AF ancestry. We focused on mixture models of proximal sources, such as Caucasus hunter-gatherer and Anatolian Chalcolithic for all 6 groups of the Caucasus cluster, with admixture portions on a genetic line of 40 through 72% Anatolian Chalcolithic related and 28 through 60% Caucasus hunter-gatherer related. We hypothesized that alternative models replacing the Anatolian Chalcolithic individual with yet unsampled populations from Eastern Anatolia, South Caucasus, or Northern Mesopotamia will likely also provide a fit to some of the tested Caucasus groups. Models with Iran Neolithic as substitute for Caucasus hunter-gatherer could also explain the data in a two-way admixture with a combination of Armenian Chalcolithic or Anatolian Chalcolithic as the other source. Kura-Araxes and Myocope individuals had likely received additional Iranian Chalcolithic related ancestry, 24.9 and 37.4% respectively. Our data from the Caucasus region cover a 3,000-year interval of prehistory during which during which we observe a genetic separation between the groups in the northern foothills and those groups of the bordering steppe regions in the north, i.e., the real steppe. We have summarized these broadly as Caucasus and steppe groups in correspondence with ecogeographic vegetation zones that characterize the socio-economic base of the associated archaeological sites, cultures. The fact that individuals buried in Kurgan in the North Caucasian Piedmont zone are more closely related to ancient individuals from regions further south in today's Armenia, Georgia, and Iran results in two main observations. Even even without direct ancient DNA data from the northern Mesopotamia, our results suggest an increased assimilation of Chalcolithic individuals from Iran, Anatolia, and Armenia, and those of the Neolithic Caucasus during 6000 through 4000 BCE, and thus likely also intensified cultural connections. It has been further suggested that, along with these influences, the key technological innovations in Western Asia that have revolutionized the late 4th millennium BCE had ultimately also spread to Europe. The insight that the Caucasus Mountains served as a corridor for the spread of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry north, but also for subtle later gene flow from the south, allows speculation on the postulated homelands of Proto-Indo-European languages and documented gene flows that could have carried a consecutive spread of both across West Eurasia. This also opens up the possibility of a homeland of Proto-Indo-European south of the Caucasus, which is what I agree with, and could offer a parsimonious explanation for an early branching off of Anatolian languages as shown on many Proto-Indo-European tree topologies. Geographical conceivable are also Armenian and Greek, which is funny because we talked about in the past the connections between Armenian and Greek, but they're both Indo-European language, so it makes sense that they're connected, but check out previous videos dealing with that. But going back, it says geographically inconceivable are also Armenian and Greek, for which genetic data supports an Eastern influence from Anatolia or the Southern Caucasus and an Indo-Iranian offshoot to the east. Talked about literally all of that with the Armenian, Greek, and Indo-Iranian or Aryan connection. Check out previous video, Haplogroup J, dealing with that. So this scenario finds support from a well-attested and widely documented steppe ancestry in European populations and the postulate of increasingly patrilinear societies in the wake of these expansions. So here is a map detailing the Kura-Araxes culture. This is from 3600 through 2800 BCE. And then here's it expanding. This is the third Kura-Araxes culture. So genetically speaking, the Kura-Araxes culture people, their ancestry, is 1. Caucasus hunter-gatherer, 2. Anatolian Chalcolithic meaning Copper Age, and 3. Iran Chalcolithic or Iranian Chalcolithic. This genetic makeup is very similar to the genetic makeup of Proto-Indo-Europeans of the Mnaic culture, but our focus is not on them at the moment. So check out previous videos on that. So here's the Kura-Araxes, basically their genetic makeup from the study that we just read. And as you can see right here in the dark green, let me actually make that bigger. In the dark green, this is the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry in the Kura-Araxes culture. And then this right here, Anatolian Chalcolithic, Anatolian Copper Age. This is it in yellow. And then in the light green is the Iran Chalcolithic DNA. And this is dealing with, again, the Kura-Araxes culture. And genetically, people of the Kura-Araxes culture is kind of no different than other Caucasian sites, and kind of interesting that the Kura-Araxes culture have this Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry, which is also seen in the Yamnaya. So they do have a shared ancestry, which is interesting. So the Y DNA chromosome of the Kura-Araxes culture is haplogroup J in majority. Again, in majority, they have haplogroup J, but they also have minor haplogroups such as G and L. It's actually believed that the expansion of haplogroup J into Europe and India was due to the Kura-Araxes culture. So here from the study we read, here's the samples, and you have J2 among these Caucasus samples, and you have J1, and then you have just, J in general. And it is the majority out of G and L, which was also found in the Caucasian samples. So this is from EUpedia, Middle East Regional DNA Project, and it says the Caucasus was the birthplace of bronze metallurgy and the two great Bronze Age cultures that stemmed from it, the Myocope-Yamnaya and Kura-Araxes cultures, expanded far and wide and reshaped the genetic landscape of Western Eurasia. South Caucasians would have belonged to haplogroup J1 and J2, later associated with the Kura-Araxes culture. So as we can see, haplogroup J, J1, and J2 is associated with the Kura-Araxes culture. So this is from EUpedia, haplogroup J2, and it says Kura-Araxes culture, 3400 through 2000 BCE, which expanded from the South Caucasus to eastern Anatolia, northern Mesopotamia, and the western Iran. From then on, J2 men would definitely have represented a sizable portion of the population of the Bronze and Iron Age civilizations, such as the Hurrians, which it has been mentioned that Hurrians descend from the Kura-Araxes culture, so that makes sense, such as the Hurrians, the Assyrians, or the Hittites. And we've mentioned the Hittites as well, in connection to the Hurrians and the Hittites as being an Anatolian European people. The Minoan civilization emerged from 2700 BCE and could have been founded by colonists from the Kura-Araxes culture who would have brought bronze working with them. So it's believed that the Minoans descend from, some Minoans descend from these Kura-Araxes migrants. Modern Cretans have the highest percentage of J2A at 11%, J1 at 8.5%, and J2A at 32%, and L plus T at 2.5% together. In Greece, and the highest percentage of J1 and J2A in all Europe, for that matter. The three haplogroups associated with the Kura-Araxes culture, which is true that we just read about. In fact, it seems that many branches of J2A may have expanded from the South Caucasus from the Chalcolithic onwards. The presence of these haplogroups and admixtures in the southern Italy almost certainly represent Kura-Araxes ancestry inherited from Minoan Greeks from the Aegean Sea. Now dealing with India, within the Indian subcontinent, J2A peaks at frequencies of 15 through 25% of the Indo-Pakistani border. The Kura-Araxes culture would have allowed the diffusion of Y-DNA haplogroup J1 and J2A around the Middle East. Archaeological evidence of a mass migration of the southern Caucasus to the Indus Valley is inclusive. Is inclusive at present, but it cannot be excluded, as it has been proven now that large-scale Indo-European migrants took place during the same period from the Pontic-Caspian steppe to Europe and Central Asia. There is no reason to believe that J2A people from the Kura-Araxes culture couldn't have expanded in the same way westward toward Anatolia, Greece, and Italy, and the south and the eastward to Iran, southern Central Asia, Pakistan, and India. So it's believed that the Kura-Araxes culture went into both Greece, making the Minoan Greeks, and into India with the expansion of Aryan groups. So putting everything together, genetically it would seem like these early haplogroup J markers autosomally were Caucasian, if that wasn't obvious enough. Wherever haplogroup J spread in ancient times, there was Caucasian autosomal DNA attached to it. Take the Greeks as an example. When haplogroup J was introduced into the Greek population, Caucasian DNA came with it. This is a paper called Genetic Origins of the Minoans and Mycenaeans, and it says, the origins of the Bronze Age Minoan and Mycenaean cultures have puzzled archaeologists for more than a century. We assembled genome-wide data from 19 ancient individuals, including Minoans from Crete and Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, and their eastern neighbors from southwestern Anatolia. We show that Minoans and Mycenaeans were genetically similar, having at least 3/4 of their ancestry from the first Neolithic farmers of western Anatolia and the Aegean, and most of the remainder from ancient populations like those of the Caucasus and Iran. However, the Mycenaeans differed from Minoans in deriving additional ancestry from an ultimate source related to hunter-gatherers of Eastern Europe and Siberia, introduced via a proximal source related to either the inhabitants of either the Eurasian steppe or Armenia. We carried out principal component analysis, projecting ancient samples onto the two principal components inferred from present-day West Eurasian populations that form two south-north parallel clines in Europe and the Near East along PC2. Minoans and Mycenaeans are centrally positioned in the PCA, framed to the left by ancient populations from mainland Europe and the Eurasian steppe, to the right by ancient populations from the Caucasus and Western Asia, and to the bottom by early/middle Neolithic farmers from Europe and Anatolia. The Bronze Age individuals from southwestern Anatolia are also distinct intermediate between Anatolian and Levantine populations towards the bottom, and populations from Armenia, Iran, and the Caucasus towards the top. This analysis shows that all Bronze Age populations from the Aegean and Anatolia derived most 62 through 86% of their ancestry from an Anatolian Neolithic related population. However, they also had a component 9 through 32% of Eastern Caucasus/Iran related ancestry. It was previously shown that this type of ancestry was introduced into mainland Europe via Bronze Age pastoralists from the Eurasian steppe, who were a mix of both Eastern European hunter-gatherers and populations from the Caucasus and Iran. The Eastern influence in the Bronze Age populations from Greece and southwestern Anatolia is also supported by an analysis of their Y chromosomes. 4 out of 5 males belonging to Minoans, Mycenaeans, and southwestern Anatolians belonged to haplogroup J, which was rare or non-existent in earlier populations from Greece and western Anatolia, which were dominated by Y chromosome haplogroup G2. Haplogroup J was present in Caucasus hunter-gatherers and a Mesolithic individual from Iran, and its spread westward may have accompanied the Eastern genome-wide influence. So again, remember, the Minoan civilization emerged from 2700 BCE and could have been influenced by colonists from the Kura-Araxes culture who would have brought Bronze bronze working with them. The reading only what's in yellow, by the way. The presence of these haplogroups and admixtures in southern Italy almost certainly represent Kura-Araxes ancestry inherited from Minoan Greeks from the Aegean Islands. Now I'm going to read what's in blue right here. In fact, it seems that many branches of J2A may have expanded from the South Caucasus from the Chalcolithic onwards. And remember, that's the Copper Age. So this is from EUpedia, and it says distribution maps of autosomal admixtures in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. And this is dealing with Caucasian admixture, as you can see up here. And it reads, the Caucasian admixture was further propagated by Near Eastern Chalcolithic farmers and the advance of the Kura-Araxes culture from the South Caucasus across the Near East and their descendants' colonization of Minoan Greece. So again, just associating Caucasian DNA with the Kura-Araxes people and their spread. So what's interesting about Caucasian DNA and haplogroup J is that you see a very interesting overlap between the two. Haplogroup J highest distribution is in the Caucasus as well as Caucasian DNA, and its expansion is out of the Caucasus and it dissipates the further away you go from it. And it's typically at a somewhat similar frequency. So here is a map of haplogroup J1. And here is a map of Caucasian admixture from DodeCAD with autosomal DNA data. And then here's a map of haplogroup J2. And if you overlap all of this together, you see that it fits perfectly. Caucasian DNA, highest percentage, obviously in the Caucasus as it expands outward. And then same thing with haplogroup J, highest in the Caucasus, J1 and J2, and then dissipates the further away you go from it, and it all overlaps one another. So the Kura-Araxes culture is highly likely the reason for the spread of both haplogroup J and Caucasian autosomal DNA in ancient times. With that being said, what was the language of the Kura-Araxes culture? The Kura-Araxes languages are an extinct language family of the ancient Near East, comprising only two known languages, Hurrian and Uratrian. Uratrian, the geographic distribution is in Armenia, Anatolia, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the Zagros Mountains, which is the geographic region of the Kura-Araxes culture as well. It is often assumed that the Kura-Uratrian language, or a pre-split Proto-Kura-Uratrian language, were originally spoken in the Kura-Araxes culture. So this paper actually deals with that, the Kura-Uratrian from a lexico-statistical viewpoint. It says the Kura-Uratrian linguistic family consists of two closely related languages, Hurrian with several dialects and Uratrian. Despite their chronological distance between the attested Hurrian and Uratrian, it seems clear that the latter is not a direct descendant of the former, but the two languages represent two separate branches of the common proto-language, Proto-Kura-Uratrian. For the pre-literate period, it is natural to associate the Kura-Uratrian people with the Kura-Araxes early Transcaucasian archaeological culture. This is from Encyclopedia of Indo-European Culture, and it says, in the period immediately prior to the emergence of the Hurrians, the northern area of their distribution was occupied by the Kura-Araxes culture, circa 3400 through 2500 BC. The distribution of the Kura-Araxes sites would encompass the territory of the Etro and Uratrians, as well as the northern part of the Hurrians. It is often assumed that the Kura-Araxes culture is an archaeological reflection of the Hurrians. And the Hurrians are a very important people. This is another paper dealing with it. Historical Dictionary of the Hittites, and it says, while the Hurrian presence in northern Mesopotamia and Syria during the later 3rd millennium BC is perforce agreed, there remains a reluctancy to concede the case for a Hurrian homeland coterminous with the extensive early Transcaucasian cultural zone. Remember, early Transcaucasian, Kura-Araxes. There is, however, now some qualified support for this theory and a willingness to postulate a proto-Hurrian homeland. This nomenclature is logical given the wide agreement that Hurrian and Uratrian were linguistically related through common Proto-Hurro-Uratrian ancestry with possible East Caucasian affinities. The people of the Kura-Araxes culture may have spoken a Proto-Hurro-Uratrian language, which makes sense considering the geographical location of Hurro-Uratrian and the Kura-Araxes culture. So here is a map just displaying the Hurro-Uratrian zone, and here's a map of the Kura-Araxes culture. And as you can see, it perfectly fits one another. It overlaps beautifully. Early Transcaucasian sites. So genetically speaking, this would solidify the connection between the Caucasus, the Kura-Araxes culture in the Caucasus, haplogroup J, and Northeast Caucasians, as well as ancient Indo-Europeans. This is from How Eurasia Was Born, and it says, the Northeast Caucasian language family seems to show clear links to ancient Eastern Anatolia, as most subclades of J1-Z1842 can be linked to the Armenian highlands and present-day Azerbaijan, precisely fitting the exact location of the Kura-Araxes culture. 3 subclades of it, J1-ZS3042, J1-ZS5658, J1-ZS2872, and J1-Z5353, are widespread along Northeast Caucasian groups, suggests Northeast Caucasian languages to have originated in the Kura-Araxes culture, as ancient J1 subclades also seem to have been present in the ancient Levant as well. This supports the existence of the Ardoian language family linking Hurrian to Northeast Caucasian. Regarding the Northwest Caucasian language family, broader analysis of other genetic components by Yumbesvi confirmed that Northwest Caucasian populations also originate from south of the Caucasus, thus from within the cradle of the Neolithic Middle East. This also supports their supposed relations to the Indo-European family, and suggests that their homeland must have been in close proximity with that of the Indo-European homeland in East Anatolia. On the other hand, it must have been west of the Northeast Caucasian homeland, as the latter seem to have covered the entire Kura-Araxes culture area. The presence of J2-M67 in Northwest Caucasian populations also points to origins south of the Caucasus, although as J2-M67 is present in human populations belonging to both Northwest Caucasian and Northeast Caucasian language groups. It is somewhat ambiguous to which language family did the population that introduced it in the region belong to. So, with that being said, there is a connection between the Kura-Araxes culture, haplogroup J, Northeast Caucasian, Hurro-Uratrian, and Caucasian autosomal DNA. This is all important for us to understand the history of the ancient Near East. And this is where we end the Kura-Araxes culture, language, and DNA. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe and share the video. Click the bell and comment down below if you have any questions. And follow my social media accounts if you want to contact me. And with all of that out of the way, have a great day and shalom.